Peter King put out his kind of preseason column yesterday. And the really interesting thing is he not only put the Saints to the playoffs, which I feel like, anyone who's kind of spent some time around the team and kind of watched how this team has operated and some of the pieces they're bringing back, some of the pieces they brought in, I think it's fair to project them as a playoff team, right? 10 wins, maybe 11. Peter King went so far as to make them the number 1 seed in the NFC. Now, that surprised me when I saw it, but then when you kind of see how he got there, it makes sense because he has the Saints at 12-5 and Green Bay at 12-5 and no one else better than 11-6. And so, yeah, I mean, if no one in the NFC has more than 12 wins, then yeah, I guess you could say that the Saints could be the number 1 seed in the NFC. But that's going to be a tough sell for me because there has not been a season since 2014. We have to go all the way back to 2014 for the top seed in the NFC to have fewer than 13 wins. We've played 17 games now. So that feels unlikely to me. Although this does seem like a season where there's no kind of super team in the NFC, right? I don't know if there is a dominant team. So maybe this is the year that everyone's kind of stuck in the middle of the pack. But yeah, Peter King has made it so we can't say that everyone told us that the Saints don't have a chance from a national media perspective, because it seems like he thinks they do. And Peter King has spent time around the team. He talked to Dennis Allen. He's quote unquote smitten with the Saints. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that it's not a coincidence that, Ian Rappaport showed up at Saints camp and he went away saying, yeah, this is a playoff team. Peter King showed up and, watched this team practice, talked to Dennis Allen, interviewed the players, kind of got a read on the team. And all of a sudden he's saying they're going to go 12-5 and win the NFC. I think that this is a team that's being very underrated. And the closer you look, the closer you get to the project, the easier it is to see that.
Yeah, for me with the Saints, it's always been, oh, Drew Brees is gone. Oh, Sean Payton is also gone this year. They're a team in disarray. There's no, the void of leadership with coaching and in the locker room. But when you really break down the roster, obviously, and then, like you said, like Ian Rappaport comes or whoever from the national media stopped by training camp to see this team in action, and you just notice obviously stock full of talent, and not just in one spot, really all over the field. The weak spot on offense is probably the tight end spot, and maybe on defense, the linebacker area. But there's so many stars all over the field. It's pretty amazing to see. And I don't know. I think besides the Saints, now that I'm thinking about it with Peter King's rankings, where does he have the Rams? I'm surprised that last year's Super Bowl champs aren't considered one of the top teams in the NFC for him, considering I don't think they've really lost much. And I know they don't have Odell Beckham right now, but they're a team that seems to be a legitimate problem, at least in the NFC. I'm not going to say a contender right now, but they are a problem for the Saints.
Yeah, he has the Rams at 10-7. He has them winning the NFC West. But what he points out, and which is fair, is the Rams have one of the more difficult schedules in the NFL this year. And, they don't have Odell Beckham Jr. They added Allen Robinson. But I do think it is very easy to overrate a team coming off of a Super Bowl, right? Like when you play that late into the season, when you have that type of emotional high, it's hard to just reset and come back the next season and have that same edge. Aaron Donald considered retiring. Sean McVay considered retiring. Now all of a sudden they're back and they're supposed to be, playing with that chip on their shoulder the same way they have been, and that's harder to do than I think it sounds at times. But so I guess the next question is, so how do the Saints get to 12-5? So to me, the way they get there is they start 4-1, right? They have the first 5 games. You have to go 4-1 against Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Carolina, Minnesota, and Seattle. So you can bake in a loss there and say they lose to Tampa Bay week 2. Tom Brady shows up and says, okay, enough of this, and just stomps on them in the dome, finally gets that win over the Saints in a Bucs uniform in the regular season. And that's okay if that happens. You can lose one of those games, and I think it's okay. They need to close at 3-2. So they need to win 3 games out of Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Carolina. So if you do that, then you are 7-3 in the beginning of the season and the end of the season, and you have a run of Cincinnati, Arizona, Las Vegas, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, LA, San Francisco. Right?
It's pretty brutal with no break.
Yes, and you would have to go 5-2 in that stretch. And that's a big ask. So that's why I don't have them I had them at 11-6, and I still feel like 11-6 is pretty close to the ceiling. I think if everything goes right, if Jameis plays out of his mind, or if he takes advantage of the weapons, if Michael Thomas is healthy, if Alvin Kamara doesn't get suspended, if Marcus May doesn't get suspended, if Tyrann Mathieu shows up and is the Tyrann Mathieu that we think he is, if Marcus May and Paulson Adebo can lock down the edges, if Bradley Roby or PJ Williams or whoever fills in the slot can pick up without a drop-off from what CJ had done, right? And, and if the offensive line protects Jameis in the way you need it to, that's probably the ceiling of 12, 13 wins. But I feel like there's going to be games that you drop throughout the season. There's going to be health issues at some point or another. You're going to lose a game you should win somewhere. And that's why I have him at 11, maybe 10. But, I think that what you're seeing from Peter here, and what I think is apparent to anyone who's watched the team a lot, is this is a team that should be on the right side of double-digit wins. And I think 10-7, 11-6 is probably the most likely. But Peter is very, very, very bold, and it's hard to hate that. Other than the fact that, like I said, it's kind of more fun when everyone's picking against you and you prove them wrong. Once you start getting the hype, then it's easier to believe your own hype. So we'll see how it goes. I think you're going to get off to a good start one way or another, because I do not see Atlanta putting up much of a fight in week 1.
It's definitely going to be interesting, but the Falcons, it's a division rival. Obviously, these games are always seem to be pretty close, no matter, what's expected of a team or how they're even playing. I definitely worry about the beginning of the year, just because you have Atlanta, Tampa, and Carolina, and those 3 back-to-back are so important for the NFC South. Right out the gates, I can't think of a year where the Saints had to come out and play 3 division opponents right off the bat.
Yeah, I think, when we talk about the playoff seeding, in the end, the NFC South is going to be a much more important than the NFC as a whole, right? Because
Definitely.
I think that getting into that top 4 kind of bracket as with a home game is going to be very important for this team. And in order to get there, you're going to have to probably beat the Bucs at least once, and then you're going to have to probably sweep Atlanta and Carolina. And I think they can do that. I think that Atlanta, if you don't sweep that team, it's going to be a massive disappointment, because I do not think that team is trying to win. I think that team is tanking. And you got to be able to take advantage of that. And then over in Carolina, I don't think they're tanking, but they probably should be, because I do not think they are built to win. They have, it's their 3rd quarterback in 3 seasons. They just, heck, it might be their 4th quarterback in 4 seasons. If you go back to Cam Newton, right. And they just they're rudderless. Matt Rule is just desperately trying to cling on to his job, and you should beat them. So we'll see what happens. I think that defense is a little better. And we saw that last year with the pass rush, kind of gave him fits with the zone blitz scheme. But if you can win the NFC South, then you can start thinking about, the top seed in the NFC. But I thought it was just really interesting to see Peter King, of all people, to put him up there. But he's high on the Saints, so we're going to see what happens.